reflects the magazine's long-standing engagement with cultural traveling, diverse histories, and its continuing commitment to extending the established boundaries of literary culture. It is renowned for publishing some of the world's most distinguished writers, including Chinua Achebe, Sam Selvon, Abdulrazak Gurna, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, and Bernardine Evaristo, amongst many others. I'm particularly delighted to be in this incredible venue. I love libraries. I think libraries are the beating heart of our reading cultures and our lives, and we need to protect them at all costs. So can we please cheer on the work that BookBunk do? I promised I wouldn't talk for very long, so this event will be led by the wonderful Billy Kahora, and it puts leading writers, publishers, cultural producers, and academics into conversation to think about the current literary ecosystem in Kenya and the possibilities for collaborative futures. So without further ado, please join me in warmly welcoming our brilliant panelists.
Hello. Habari zenyu? How's everyone doing? Thanks so much, Sana. Thanks so much, Rachel, for those wonderful introductions. This is such an incredible space. I grew up not very far away from here, just Buruburu, maybe a 10-minute drive down that side. And when I was growing up, I had to go to the library. The other library, BookBunk, is restoring, which is Macmillan. So just the fact that I think this area has this space for kids to come and read is just incredible. So another round of applause if you don't mind. Yeah. So I'll ask everyone to just talk about their work as a way of introducing themselves, and then we'll get into the conversation. And I think we should start with Wendy, if you don't mind. Just talk about your work and what you do, and yeah.
Okay, is this thing on? Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for coming. I see a few familiar faces. It's always good to be in a room where you know people. But this is possibly my first time sitting this side of a panel. I'm always the person asking questions. This is me forestalling, talking about myself, but let me go. So my name is Wendy Njoroge. I have been many things, books. First, I was a reader for as long as I can remember, but in a professional way, a community builder, a bookseller, a festival organizer, a book fair organizer, and currently a publisher. So I suppose I will come with all 5 hats to this conversation. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mugaa. First of all, thank you so much for coming out here. I always get very pleased to see people coming out for literary events and just to listen to people talk and to hear about their ideas about books and what we love. So my name is Mugaa. I am a writer and an editor. I've been a writer for a while, and I write short stories, basically fiction and also non-fiction. I've written a book called Half Portraits Underwater. It's my first book, and it was published in 2024. Yeah, so that's on a day-to-day basis. I work in an organization called World Resources Institute. I work there as a writer as well. More or less, it's defined as communications work, but it's still writing. So that's what I do.
Mjambo. Okay, good evening. Now I wanted Kiza. Where's Kiza? I mean, Kiza should be speaking Kiswahili because... No. Yeah, that one, leave him alone. Yeah, my name is Tom Odhiambo. I teach literature, I teach communication, media, performing arts. Yes, at the University of Nairobi. But for quite some time, I've seen myself as a writer, a literary critic in the newspapers. I tend to walk around bragging that I'm the oldest book reviewer in the region. I've stuck with books for this is my 27th year of writing about books. I think nobody else writes about books in the newspapers. I think that's the job. Actually, that's how I got to know Billy and Angela and Dennis and Wendy. Now, Wendy just didn't say that she started publishing, thinking seriously about books, publishing, writing because of COVID. And I think that's how we got to know each other, because she would put stuff on status and I would say, okay, where's this book? And she would supply. So yes, generally I've been around books since I could read, because in my father's house, you were either reading or sleeping, because you needed to come back home with a grade not below 3. Either 1, 2, or 3. And if you came back with grade 3, you slept straight so that the following day you can explain what's lacking. That is it books, is it food? So I've hung around books for as long as I remember. And the reason I think that people underestimate what Angela is doing is because it's books, is the Kisumu National Library that formatted me. I literally read all African writer series that were there. And how many of you know the Aztecs? The Aztecs from Mexico. Yeah, so I first read about that in a library. And I always use that as a trick when I want to find out how people actually read. So libraries, I think again we'll clap for Angela for bringing us here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. The legendary Tom Odhiambo. I want to extend that clap with a fun fact that the first person that ever worked for Book Bank as a team member, KRA, taxpayer, and all the formalities that come with that is actually a student of Tom Odhiambo's, Marianne Wamoyo, who runs our programs. My name is Angela Wachuka. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to Eastlands Library, and especially to the people who are visiting this space for the first time. I'm the co-founder of Book Bank. We restore public libraries. I understand you went on a tour earlier, so you've heard all about that. And this evening, this congregating is exactly the reason why we do that work. So I feel particularly elated to have all of you come and join us this evening. In addition to the work at Book Bank, I'm also the director of Nairobi Lit Fest, which is a literary festival that happens in public libraries across the city, including this one. In fact, this is our main space. So keep coming. This happens the second weekend of May every year, like clockwork. And then recently I've also found myself to be one of 2 protagonists, along with my co-founder, Njoroge, who's an author. I've always surrounded myself with those types, the writers and the authors and the poets and things, of a film called How to Build a Library. I encourage you to see it if you can while you're in Nairobi. It's showing at Unseen Cinema, which is on Ngong Road, and they have a few screenings every week. And it's really just the story of the behind the scenes of restoring libraries or renovating them, whichever one you want to choose. Apart from that, I am a recovering publisher. We set up something called Bank Book, so doubled back into that after almost a decade at Kwani, working with wonderful people like Billy Kahora. Asanteni, welcome.
Thanks all. So I'm going to ask each of you to reflect on your respective roles and what you think they mean to the wider literary ecosystem in Kenya. And I'm going to follow the book value chain. So start with Dennis as a writer, and then come to Wendy as a publisher, and then Wachuka as a library founder, etc., and then Tom as a critic and a teacher. Yeah. So, Dennis, what do you think the role of the writer is in general in the wider literary ecosystem? What are your own experiences? Yeah.
So when I began writing, I just thought I wanted to write as a way of sort of like expressing something I felt that I didn't see another medium which could allow me to do that. But as the more and more I wrote, and as writing became more serious, I began to think of what is my role as a writer. And I think there's a book by Achebe called There Was a Country, where he tries to, in one chapter, he tries to see what is the role of a writer. And he didn't really provide an answer, a proper answer, but the role of a writer, he says, is not to be on the side of the oppressor. So I think this gives a writer like myself a greater degree of his Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. So the first one is called the Northern Compass. I should be called the Northern Compass. So excited to go on that adventure and just being really, really excited to find this path through books and just being excited. I would be given compositions to write in school, and my compositions were so wild. Like, they were very imaginative, because I would ask people, now that as I've grown older, I always ask people, oh, so what did you write in compositions? Everyone used to write either they were kidnapped or they had a fire. And I used to think to myself, oh, how come you didn't think of something else? But I remember just having this thrill of writing and being thrilled. But as I got older, there's another teacher of mine who said, who tried to take me out of that space of imagination. She was like, oh, maybe you should write about the things that you see. And we just write about the things that you see. And I remember this is very Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid. In one of the writings that the narrator does, she just writes about what she sees and her sickness and how she feels about being sick. And as I continued writing, I was like, oh yeah, there's so much to what I see. There's so much to what I see. And James Baldwin has this thing where he says, a friend of his, a painter, taught him how to see. So the question, why I write and why I always try to, whatever it is that I try to do on the page, is to show what I see in real life. So essentially my role is to reflect what I see in society, but in ways which don't betray the same society. Yeah.
Just a very quick follow-up question. Do you think there's a tension between kind of writing about what you're seeing in society and what we call aesthetics or stylistics, or basically the tension between the way you write and what you write about?
No. I feel like I had a conversation with a friend of mine where we tried to understand the difference between form and content. And in the end, our conclusion was the form does inform, the form informs the content informs the form and vice versa. So some stories, maybe you want to write them in present tense. Maybe that's the only way they can be written. And I go back to Achebe again, where during the Biafra War, Achebe says the only way he could reflect upon what was happening is through poetry. And I don't think after that he wrote poetry again. But he just says what we understand now is, what I understood from that is how what is happening to us in our lives and what we see informs how
examination's sake, come in to fill that gap. Yeah. So sometimes it's an exercise in economic cartwheels. Yeah. And I guess that's the reality of the thing. But should you be able to do it well, you would be able to have 2 authors who are able to carry 15 authors. And you should be able to be happy with that imbalance. So I'll wait for the recovering publisher to speak or further on the economics of it. But I guess that's a question I've been trying to answer.
Yeah, thanks. So Dennis writes the book, you publish it, it lands in the library. So I'll turn to Wachuka to talk about the library and what its role is, in what you think its role is, and what it has been in your experience.
Thanks, Billy, and thanks to the two of you. It makes a sort of connecting tissue between the sort of different stages of bookmaking. So I suppose to take it from there, if you're looking at the book as material, the first role of the library is simply access. Once that work has been published, how many people are able to access it? And I think for us, the context specifically in Kenya is looking historically at how we've treated books in terms of pricing and access points, in terms of the division of the publishing industry itself, being roughly 80 to 90% focusing on curriculum material. And so you're left over with a small number of people who are doing what they were just both describing. Whether it's for that 80% material that's being published for curriculum consumption and therefore absorbed by government through a kind of different ecosystem from what the two of you are describing, or whether it's coming from this sort of publisher, pricing is a big issue. Kenya is one of a handful of countries in Africa that charges VAT on books. We pay 16% VAT on books. There are very few countries that do that. So the role of the library in that context becomes an access point. To give you a practical example, I think the books that you're looking at here and where you visited earlier in Kaloleni Library, if I'm not wrong, we are at about or close to 24,000 new books that have been added to the collection. And when I talk about access, I talk about the entirety of it. A public library is in a powerful position to commission forms even, right? There's legislation in this country, at least, that allows you, if you're running this kind of project, for example, through something called the Marrakesh Treaty, to translate any book that's in the country into Braille. And so we've been able basically to turn that also into an access point. I think in the back in this room, we started off with about 10 books, very popular books, specifically by African authors, trying out Braille and what the uptake for that looks like. The other role is exactly this, a convening space. It was the very first thing that we did when we were trying to experiment with what these spaces could look like in the future. And so that meant, again, through the support that you're able to access, we actually just gave money out as grants to artists in general. Are you a filmmaker wanting to show your film? And then we would kind of fall back and support with the sort of infrastructure that you need for that. Programs have been such an enriching thing to think about from a library perspective. I think it's worth mentioning when we go back to, okay, let me talk about programs first. These libraries, at least the ones that we've worked on, have never lacked people coming in. The amount of people coming into a library has never been the issue. The issue has been the what. What's available when they come in? What services do they have access to? Is there Wi-Fi? Are there toilets? Sometimes it's as basic as that. And the answer to that question about are there toilets is no. We've had to build them. But I think that the single most kind of important thing for me has been libraries as civic infrastructure. Understanding these spaces not just as access points, even though they do give access to all of these things I've described. But if you think of them as public infrastructure, and therefore the servicing of them falls under a particular line of spending, it becomes a completely different conversation. And of course, in this country, we've always had the existence, well, as long as Kenya has existed, we've had the existence of the Kenya National Library Service, right? But as things have moved along, this was supposed to be instituted right after the 2010 Constitution, but only recently did libraries get devolved. And so you have KNLS, who are running about 63 libraries across the country, are now running what's classified as national libraries only, which are a total of 3 in the country. The one that you mentioned down the road in Buruburu, and then there's Maktaba Kuu in Upper Hill, and then there's a national library in Nakuru. So what becomes, for me, the role of the public library when you think of it as a devolved function, right? It means that you have 47 times however many libraries exist in a county to experiment and to think about what that ecosystem can look like.
No, thanks, fantastic. Tom, I'll turn to you to reflect on the role of academia, research, and specifically the Department of Literature at the University of Nairobi within our wider literary ecosystem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I also want to say that, like Wendy, I'm a publisher. When I came back to this country in 2007, and then we met with Billy. They used to be in a very cool space, Billy and Angela. They used to live somewhere on Lavington.
No.
The road,
Chiromo,
what's that?
Chiromo there.
And there are all
near Wayakiwe, nearer to Wayakiwe.
Yeah, there were all these trees and
most people don't know this, sorry. We almost actually moved to Sarakasi, right? There was that big debate.
I thought you did.
No,
okay.
Not us.
So this place was very cool, and people are always talking books, and there are all sorts of people. Actually, you went there, you bumped into an Ethiopian, and you went there, you bumped into a Ugandan, and you went there, you bumped into a Tanzanian. And there was something quite interesting. So at that time, there was David Kaiser around, and Paselelo Kantai, and Tom Maliti. And there used to be a bar called NIBS, Nairobi Institute of Business Studies Bar, I think so, in Kileleshwa, and we used to hang out there. It was just bubbling with ideas. So David Kaiser, I, and Paselelo, we came up with something called native intelligence. And native intelligence had a child called Contact Zones. And Contact Zones Nairobi. And Contact Zones Nairobi sought to publish texts that nobody wanted to touch. And this was a kind of, I always tell my students, you got to be a good thief, because this was partly thieving from what Billy, Kahora, and others had started, that pick that which people don't really want. And so we published Tony Mochama, for example, a book that is called The Night Runner. Basically, Tony Mochama just actually retells his stories of pubs in Nairobi that some of them are no longer around. So he hops from one bar to the other. That's the first book that I kind of edited under Contact Zones. So we had 3 very successful books, really. Tony Mochama's Night Runner, Kevin Mwashiro's Invisible. And the story of Invisible is interesting because when we launched it, we thought we should have policemen around, because at least in advance, people had asked us, why are you launching a book about gay people? And we told them, well, you read it and then make a decision whether the book is interesting or not. Then the third one was Matatu. So that's how I'm connected to kind of publishing. Contact Zone exists. Actually, it's the only imprint in Nairobi that has published books on visual arts, performing arts. We are the only people to have ever published Peterson Kamwadi, whose exhibition on the post-election violence 2007 was absolutely incredible. It was called Sitting Allowance. I've always thought that a student of mine would ever write a thesis on this, because the fight for parliament was about fight for sitting allowance. Okay. And that exhibition was bought by Branson, it's called Branson, the Virgin Atlantic guy, the brother-in-law, bought the entire exhibition. So what we have is actually the publication from Contact Zones. So I'm telling this story to illustrate something small here. That one day you will be somewhere in New York or Harvard, Yale, and somebody is going on about the 2007 post-election crisis and reflecting deeply on the archive. And that the entire exhibition was at the Gute. It was absolutely breathtaking. It took away your breath because you wondered, did we actually fight because of the sitting allowance? Yes, we did. And this guy will go on and on and on, and you'll be there as a Kenyan and you'll have no idea. Why is this important for this gentleman, this Wendy and Angela here? Because this is an archive that we lost. We only now have it in a book form, Contact Zones. And I'm talking about this because I was closely involved in this whole process. And so I came back from South Africa with this burning ambition to set up something called Kenyan Archive Online. Why? Because I would be in class with Linda there, and we would be seriously looking for a book from Kenya, and we had to send somebody to buy the book and literally bring us. But we had a savior, which was the UNISA library, because the UNISA library probably has got the largest stock of African-produced books anywhere else in the world. This is important for anybody in this room, that if you have a text, try to share it with somebody, because that creates a memory. But some people are nice enough, they photocopy the book. But I like the ones who just keep the book and tell you it got lost, because somehow you have a memory of the book, but the book has traveled. And so the way, and I'm saying this very confidently because my students always pick my books. And that's fair enough because I suspect they read them. Okay. And even if they don't read them, at least those books reflect to those who see them with those books that this guy is possibly reading something. This is the only reason I write reviews in the newspapers, and you won't believe you write a very innocent review. I'm supposed to have submitted a review on a book on Somalia, the collapse of Siad Barre regime up to now, which I have to do late tonight. You write a review and it looks dead. And then on Monday, you get a message on the email, because I always put my email down there, from somewhere in Nyahururu saying, I know the author of this book, I want the book. So magazines, publication like Wasafiri is incredible in the sense that it always runs this stuff. Nation has been kind enough to run reviews. Standard is struggling because they can't pay reviewers. So I always see the literary critic in the classroom as the first line reviewer of books. And the problem with the classroom is that it confines the text to the classroom. But the magazine and the newspaper takes it out there. And you're asking about the Department of Literature. Remember, this department used to have at least 2 literary magazines. And the reason they failed is that there's practically no funding. There's actually practically no funding even for the journal in the department. So what somebody like I would do, I guess a few of my students would agree with me on that, is that when I taught a course, I once taught a course called Comparative Study of African Literature. So I would be the first line entry into a lot of new books from Africa, not Kenya, because I insisted on teaching at least what I used to call 54+1, which was 54 African countries. I always add the country that Morocco occupies as an African country. +1 meant the diaspora. And then 3 years after I stopped teaching the course, I saw there's a course now in the department called Literature of the Diaspora. I said, okay, here's a change being made. So departments of literature, wherever, are actually in the old days used to be a primary, Moi University, where I did my bachelor's degree. It was a nightmare to study there because the lecturers insisted you read, but you couldn't find some of the books. I can tell you, how many of you here have read Voices in the Dark by Leonard Kibera? This book used to be gold when I was a first-year student. And the reason I became a little bit famous is that I harassed the teacher who gave me the copy and I photocopied it. And then remember, you guys don't do that anymore. We used to write in our books, tomes, that this is my copy. So you got a book and with Geraldine's. So Tom's copy of Voices in the Dark used to circulate. So when I came to teach at the University of Nairobi, what I did instead was, yes, I bought the books. When I went to my class for the first time, I taught without any books. Then the following week, I had a carton box of about 60 books. I'm proud to say that 70% of that class, that first class I taught, which reported me for harassing them, are PhD holders in literature. But the point I'm making is this: there is no excuse for us not to disseminate our stories. So Billy, I'll end this by saying, because we can go on. I'll end this by saying, is Doslin in the house?
Unfortunately, I don't think she's here.
If Doslin is not here, this is how important it is to think about books and how to share books. So she might just tell you something about this. So I teach a course, Comparative Study of African Literature. In the last class, I teach African short stories. And the entire class, I base it on Kane Prize short stories, which you know very well you used to give. This man is a good man. He used to give me books for free. That's the only reason I can buy my beer. So,
It's not free.
Yeah. This man would give me every Kane Prize for African Writing, the latest issue, for free. So I had like 6 of them. So Doslin follows me to my office, I think with 2 other people. And they ask me, what does somebody do beyond this? I tell them, if you don't do your PhD, you'll get married, which is also a good deal, right? And I tell her that it's something that I think we need to think about, which is called the politics of prizes, right? And I think Doslin worked on that for her PhD. It just demonstrated how the network works. Billy himself wrote for Kane Prize. Then Billy and Angela became publishers through Kwani of Kane Prize books. As a critic, I read the books. I taught them in class. I transferred that to my student, who ended up writing her PhD on that. And now is a professor of literature, and I hope that goes like this. So in many ways, the Department of Literature at the University of Nairobi still runs a course on creative writing, but these things can't go far, because if students do not have the latest copies of books, there's always something new to animate you. You can read all stuff. You can read Shakespeare all you care about, but when I read this guy at 11 at night, and I see a story, and I say, how could this guy be imagining a love story from America to Kenya? And I want this to be taught, because this guy is writing that story at a time when Kenyans who are in the 70s are being sent back to Kenya with a satchel, just a bag. So that kind of imagination needs to circulate. Departments of literature used to be great, because in the old days they would give you a course outline in advance of. That's what happened to us in Moi University. Linda will tell you that's what happened to us at WITS. So we always read in advance, and if you read and you felt that you haven't gotten what you wanted, you read extra. So the only reason I review books a lot is because I receive a lot of books. Some of them really worth reviewing, like you read for 2 days, you review. Some of them really struggling. I just got a book yesterday on Nakuru town, on a very good story. One settler who was killed in Nakuru, and it's like her body was thrown in Menengai crater. It's a sensational story. It's a book that needs to be read and reviewed. And when you start reading it, you think this guy needed to have somebody to assist them. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think the circularity of books is something we need to invest in. Departments of literature still teach. We haven't taken our books to journalism. I think we should. We should take our books to our lawyers. That's why they stupidly still quote Shakespeare when they should be quoting Ngugi in the courtroom, but they quote Shakespeare because they have Googled him. not because they've read him. And we need to do this. I actually tell my friends from economics to use Things Fall Apart in year 1, in Introduction to Economics. You can teach Things Fall Apart from religion, philosophy, politics, literature, law, economics. It's got a lesson in there. So that's what I try to do. Thank you very much.
So much, Tom. So because this is supposed to be a dialogue and we want it to be interactive, I'll just quickly ask each of you to reflect on what the barriers and opportunities are in collaborating with each other. So Dennis, as a writer, what do you need from Wachuka and the libraries? What do you need from academics and researchers? We know what you need from the publisher, but yeah.
I would say the biggest impediment as a writer is simply money. Because for you to actually be a good writer, one of the main things that you need, I do think anyone can be a good writer, but one of the main things you need is time. You can just need time, first of all, time to read, and then time to write, and after that time to write, you also need the time to edit. But I think, where are you going to get this time, really? And at the same similarly, because of this lack of money, you find a lot of people now you have to work extra jobs or do extra things just to get by. And by you doing this extra thing so that which can support your writing, you end up being so tired that you can never even do the actual writing itself. So I feel like the biggest impediment for many writers who never actually do the writing itself is an income, just a basic income to actually do the work. So what you find is that a lot of people who can now just do the writing are mainly upper class or middle class. But the way Kenya's middle class is sort of like disappearing with the taxes. But I would say it takes a lot of support or a lot of financial support for writers to actually write. And what I find is that many writers end up self-publishing. And without taking the time to actually have gone through the books. Yes, there is the passion, there is all this, and but then if someone has not read, it becomes very difficult for them to write well. Yeah.
How many young writers? Okay, how many writers are there in the room? Just hands up. Both. Silete hizo siasa hapa. Let's not get into those siasas. Thank you. I was always being advised as a writer, look, you try and get the job that gives you the most money, where you spend the least time. Does anyone know what that job is? Yes, Paul? Huh? Photographer maybe. But you know these guys who dunga people shindanos in hospital? A nice zoologist. You just go there, you do that thing, and you go home, and you get paid well. So you just write. You marry rich. I'll just move on to Wendy. I know what you need from Dennis, the writer, but I'm very curious. What are the barriers and kind of opportunities for collaboration with academics and the university and the library?
So I think the challenges in publishing are many, but I'll highlight maybe some of the bigger ones and some of the ones that everyone in the room and even on the panel, we can start to think and see differently in terms of how to, creatively problem solve. I think the basic thing that the publisher needs is a reader. So the readers have to be aware that the thing is there, so then they can access it, and so you're able to do more of that and that. So I think access becomes, a big stopgap for that with the libraries, but also making readers aware that these books exist, and that's why I'm very passionate about building reading communities. So as people who are in this room, I'm sure you don't need someone to convince you to read. But we all know people in our lives who maybe haven't a book since they left, formal schooling. However, they're consuming other forms of art. They're listening to music. They are going to movies and plays and all those things, right? Those are our potential customers. So how do we, how do we make them appreciate the art that lives in the literary form? So I see some book club people, some people who organize amazing events in the room. So I think we're already solving for that, and obviously event spaces. But the bit that I would love to see more of is academia working in the publishing space. And research is a big thing. Quantitative research especially is important. Data. Data makes things intelligible to everyone in the same way. Like when I say 100% of this, or this is 10 shillings, we all understand it the same way. And I think specifically for Kenya, I'll speak for here because this is where I know, we are a big economy if you look at other market segments, right? But when it comes to books, outside of, I'm speaking outside of, with the exception of education books, who we all know why they are thriving, and it's because they have patronage from schools. It's not, so the rest of us have to build a market for ourselves, right? So that's where the data would come in, and in other markets you have market data, and it makes it very easy for somebody like me to make a decision and know if I'm taking a bet. Remember earlier when I said the economics of publishing are such that you have 10% paying for the 90%, and anyone will tell you that that's how it works, because not everything is a hit, and you can't be a publisher of hits. Like, nobody has cracked that math yet, and there are important books that won't be for everyone, right? So how do you then know how to, to spread that math? How then do you know how to do, to forecast, or even, most especially, to attract in funding or infrastructure? Unless I can make a commercial case, right, and say, this is why I need your money, I need to list this company on the NSE. I mean, if you go to a banker and say, okay, even give me a loan, I have to provide data, right? So we find that market data is not something that is readily available, and that's why I'm really excited when the British Council commissioned a very broad-based research on the publishing industry. However, in Africa, but it's still very top level, but it's a good place to start for us to ask specific questions. And because academia has the liberty and also the capability to ask these questions, what are readers interested in, even in subject matters? What's a volume of, what's a market size in Kenya shillings of the book industry outside of school books? How is it spread across the country? What does Nairobi look like? Those are really important questions which I think academia has space, room, and I hope interest, which publishers as independent people might not be able to do those kinds of cultural studies, market studies, but would be great to see. Then because we can talk to other people who are not like arts, but are not maybe that beholden to art, but when they see money and they see ROI, they understand those languages, and we can take that and make it a thriving commodity.
Thanks, Wendy. Wachuka, what do you need from academia and publishers? I guess we know what you need from publishers and writers, but yeah, I'm quite curious. What are the barriers and opportunities?
Thank you. A lot. It was actually quite something to listen to you, Tom, talk about the circularity of things, because I agree very strongly. The literary ecosystem has always had some kind of, I might say now, a lot more of a matured connectivity. So there are strong nodes, right? You have literary festivals that are happening in libraries and elsewhere, book fairs, all the rest of it. But I think the kind of weakness to address is the connective tissue between all of those things. And maybe one day we figure it out, but I think one of the challenges with all our models is, you know, if you're restoring a public library like Macmillan, you're probably classified as like culture, heritage, and you're going for that kind of support and that sort of money. That doesn't necessarily connect with university department budgets and how that is figured out. And that doesn't necessarily also connect with libraries that are essentially being run by government, and how does that happen? So what are the kind of connective tissues around that? It was great to listen to that. Thank you. To Billy's question about what did you ask? How many young authors are in the room? Yes. Yeah, I'm going to ask, okay, how many, age doesn't really matter, but I suppose, how many people do we have in the room who are at the beginning of their career in research or academia? Okay. Wow, congratulations. That's a beautiful struggle. And I'm asking this question because I want to answer your question, Billy, with two possibilities. And what you said, Wendy, about data is something I can go on about all day, because I think it's a shared challenge. And I think, going back to the question about the role of libraries, one of the better things we've done is been able to commission research, leveraging on the public nature of all these spaces. But so I'll talk about opportunities. There are challenges, but I also see opportunities in them at two levels, and particularly for the young people that self-identified as being at the beginning of their journey. The first is the potential, because of what libraries are providing access to dig into archives. So what's being digitized and now available to young researchers in a way that wasn't the case even 5 years ago. And to give you a practical example, the Macmillan Memorial Library holds one of the most, I think, interesting archives in this country. You know, it's the oldest library in Nairobi. Now, as to the nature of those archives, we're talking primarily colonial in nature. But there are opportunities that have been taken to inject the collection, the archival collection, with contemporary sort of archives, if you like. So them Mushrooms, who are a musical group, are archiving their entire kind of music-making career over many decades. We partner with them to do that, and in exchange, that archive is then available to you as the public to access for free. And I think that's a great opportunity, and you can say the same of gazettes that we've digitized, ordinances, minutes of city council meetings from the 1920s to the 1940s, you know, at a time, a crucial time of making Nairobi City what it turns out to be, for better or worse. But if you're in your research journey looking specifically, for example, at how did the city become the city? Also, what were the populations like? Where in the city did they live? Problems of access. How did the Kipande become the ID? Why is Eastlands, you know, the first place that Kenyans settle in the city? All those histories are in that archive and available. And we're talking, if I have the number right, about 396,000 specific things that we've archived for access. So I think it's been a great challenge, the journey, it continues, but I also think it's a great opportunity specifically for the kind of people who are in the room. The second thing relates to what you were saying, Wendy, about data. I'll take a quick poll if anyone wants to guess how many public libraries exist in Kenya. I know that you saw a map outside when you were going on your tour. But that map is of public libraries in Nairobi only. And they are 149 in total that you can classify as public libraries. I know, it's shocking. And the context for that, and why I'm bringing it up, is that when we started this journey, one of the biggest gaps that we faced was data. We didn't know what kind of ecology we were existing in. We didn't know how many libraries in Kenya not only are classified as public libraries, but what's in their collections, what's in their archives, what needs to be digitized and rescued and reformatted into other shapes so that so many more people can access them. And so we started off with Nairobi, and then we expanded over time. It took a period of 5 years. It was very patient work. It was also very like post-COVID hangover. But we got it done eventually, and we ended up mapping out 1,196 public libraries in Kenya, which is about 40% of all the public libraries on the continent. I'm using this specific example because I think it's a great opportunity, the research aspect. What's been discovered about those libraries has gone further into who funds them, what collections do they carry, what archives do they have, and I would imagine that if you have research interests that are related to that, there are great opportunities to partner, not just with organizations like Book Bank that hold that research, which is publicly available, but also with maybe specific libraries whose collections you may be interested in. So I see those kind of two opportunities as really big ones. And to go back to the academy, I think all those things can be fashioned into research fellowships, where people get positioned in public libraries, for example. I don't think that's something that we have explored, and there's a lot of room to.
Thanks so much, Wachuka. Tom, what are the barriers and opportunities in collaborating with writers, publishers, and libraries? And opportunities also.
Personally, I think I always say I'm very blessed in the sense that I'm probably one of the few people in Nairobi who can walk into Bookstopia and get a 10% discount automatic for any book. Yeah, I'm probably one of the, you can count them, 10 or so. For over 10 years, I've had an arrangement with Prestige Bookshop where I can pick as many books as I want, read them, review them, and pay sometimes after 6 months. So to that extent, I'm extremely privileged. I'm extremely privileged that people walk into my office with books. They ask me, many of them is a little bit of a drama. They walk in, they ask, is Tom Odhiambo around? I say, who? Why do you want him? Oh, I'm looking for him for this and that. Do you know him somehow? And then I say, it's me. They doubt if it's me because they're looking for a tall, dark guy, bigger, with probably a stomach a little bit in front, and speaking elevated English. And I speak a lot of Kiswahili. If you come to my office, if I don't know you, because I suspect you are a spy. And I'm telling you this in the real sense that the former chief spy in this country walked into my office with this book and said, I know you. And I said, okay, that's interesting. And he said, I have my book. I'm a former chief spy. I'm not so sure you will believe what's in here. And then I told him, leave that to me. And I wrote a review of the book. I saw the other day people looking for the book. So that's how I meet a great man like him, comes all the way to my office. We sit down and you sing the author in real life. So I'm privileged to that extent. I think I've had a very good working relationship. Kenyan publishers are not like South African publishers who, when I started reviewing books for the Sunday Independent, I would just get a box of books in front of my door with a note, if you ever review any one of these books, please send us the review. Kenyan publishers are not like that. Kenya Literature Bureau is a terrible, terrible publisher. They never send out review copies, and they are slightly arrogant and rude. And yet, they are the biggest publishers of Kenyan autobiographies. They publish the most because it's a public company. every little big shot, and I emphasize little big shot, will go there and get a huge discount and publish the book on our budget as taxpayers, and they will arrogantly tell you to buy the book at 3,000 shillings, which is a huge income for a lot of people. But as for the rest of the publishers, once in a while I call in and I say, do you know who I am? And I get the books. Sometimes this is interesting if you talk to authors. Like, so who are you? I say, I'm a reviewer. So why is that important? I say, give me your book, then we can sort out that. So I get lots of books from, I think Wendy has just done something nobody has done around. Wendy, can I say what you've done? So Wendy has, I think, decided that she's going to invite potential critics to register with her company, and that when the books come through, they'll send you. And I said, okay, miracles happen in Nairobi. So I'm a man of miracles, in as much as people call me Doubting Thomas. I love miracles. Writers have been generous. I think the other opportunity is that if you're in Nairobi 15 years ago, when these two were probably the most known face, these two and Muthoni Garland were the most known face of lit fests. Now, every morning I see something in my inbox as a lit fest, you understand? There's a lit fest literally every other week, and I'm like, people have energy. This is good. Yeah, because lit fests are good. You get a wife there, you get a husband there, you meet your enemy and you are polite to each other, you learn the tactics of diplomacy. I've met enemies at lit fest and like, oh, so it's you? I'm like, no, I'm the cousin to that guy. You understand? Oh, by the way, I'm very serious. People don't believe it's me when they meet me. So I'm capable always to say I am the cousin. You understand? And lit fests are great because if you're a pretender to writing, you actually get people crying there, but also talking about stories of success. I don't know whether you guys have noticed, in the recent past, somebody has started posting a lot of these memes online about, oh, so-and-so, released 1,500 singles, and he only got successful single number 1,499. Why are you harassing us with 2 trials? Have you seen that thing? It's been doing a lot of rounds of late. I mean, it's kind of, it's nice. These armchair philosophers say a lot of things. But the point is that Kenyan authors are trying. The big challenge with Kenyan authors is the process of mediating the manuscript to the bookshelf. I think that's struggling. They can't afford good editors. And I can tell you for free, AI will never edit your book because AI is largely taught by my students. The machine is taught by my students. And if my students can't write an essay about going to Kisumu, how are they going to edit your essay about going to Kampala? Because to go to Kampala, you must pass through Kisumu. And I think the reason Nigerians beat us at this game, Wendy, is that apart from, by the way, just know, stop your little Kenyan comparison with Nigerians. There are parts of Nigeria that had street lights when some parts of England had never known what street lights were. So just stop comparing yourself to Nigerians. Secondly, Nigerians are probably the most enthusiastic people in the world because they see opportunity where there is total darkness. Lastly, the reason they beat us, they are extremely obsessed with contexts. A small-time Nigerian crook will defend all the crooks in Nigeria. So they understand their stuff. So for me, our writers, apart from what he's saying, we really need to have somebody talk to people to create endowments and residencies locally. There's so many young people who are writing actually very good books. And you read this book, and then towards the end, the person slips off the writing curve, and a good editor would have seen the context quite immediately and crafted that. But the other challenge for writers that I see is that there's nowhere in this country where they teach marketing of books. And I am just one of the few people who, in the background, I literally teach writers how to market books. Yesterday, I was talking to an author whose book I worked on for 11 years, who is enthusiastic that they are doing a second print, most likely in the next 3 months, And I was telling them how to sell off the remaining copies. By just staging a one evening at Strathmore, they'll sell all those copies. So in this country, they now have a course in information science properly at the University of Nairobi. More universities used to do it, but a lot of those guys ended up in government. I know a lot of them because when it was introduced there, I was there. But I think what we need as a collabo, which is something that you guys were doing some years back with the British Council, was kind of a networked system that also teaches artists and writers and publishers and book dealers and archivists and critics like us how you do make sure the book is on a pedestal all the time. Because if you don't put the book on a pedestal, it's not going to work. Just my last way of thinking through this. Who knows the Gideons? If you know the Gideons are so kind that even in the busiest brothel, there's a Bible there. Yes, this is just marketing at its best. By the way, I use that as an example when I talk about marketing. If you go to the busiest brothel anywhere in the world, in the room you'll find a free copy of the Gideon's Bible. Originally, they used to put the whole Bible. Then people are stealing them to resell. Then now they just put the New Testament. And that, if you are here and you're interested in marketing, start thinking like that. Wendy is trying. I think we need to create niche markets as well. Books actually are sold in relation to niches. You either address a particular audience. And lastly, let's stop crying that books are pirated. I think Nairobi is now the headquarters of book pirating, the way Zambia is the headquarters of CD and movie pirating. Now they are pirating any book in Nairobi for as long as it sells. But the idea is that can we address a particular audience in a very forceful way, so that if this guy can get 1,000 copies of his book sold fast, then we can start thinking about how to promote the next 1,000. There's a code as well. If you are photocopying, if you go on River Road and you produce a good song in Kikuyu, there's a code there that in the first 3 months they will not produce pirate copies, but after 3 months don't talk to them. So we who transact in books, we should be very aggressive in newspapers, on radio, TV. I thought Hainga would have been here, in the classrooms amongst our friends. Lastly, because this might be my last words, please buy a friend a book for Christmas and the New Year. I don't gift anybody anything, including my boss in the house, except a book. But if you are my friend and you're in this room, you owe me a book. My good friends, I heard this guy talk of middle class. If you are above middle class, you owe me a good bottle of whiskey, but a book first. Thank you very much.
Tom. Yeah. I think we can take a round of 3, 5. I'm asking how we are doing for time. Is that okay, Rachel? Or
good evening, everyone. First, I'd love to commend Book Bank for doing all of this in the libraries. The topic of my question is Gen Z in literature. How do you see this generation? What's your reflection on what they're doing in the literary space?
shall we take 3 questions? Is that okay? Okay. We'll swing this way.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mutinda Kilonzo. I am one of the few Gen Zs in literature. I'm a creative director for the new Kwani with a Q. And creative director for Njoroge, a literary magazine for drunken lectures. And just because I'm in the space and fairly new in the space, I wanted to ask, especially the writer and the publisher, in regards to the last question that Billy asked, what does collaboration look like between the different facets that are represented on the panel, non-monetary wise? That's but what does it look like? And have you tried to imagine what does collaboration look like, writer to writer, writer to publisher, publisher to critic, writer to critic, to the libraries, non-monetary wise? Because I know money is a very big issue, especially in this industry. You just mentioned it, Mugaa, and referring just to the last question, we've talked about it, and I like how Tom answered the question, and he kind of referenced how that can look like non-monetary wise. But how does it look like for you? How does it look like for a publisher, in case you've imagined that kind of a scenario where this and this, this and that, and money is not involved, and you create a product where it's really perfect for the audience to now input the money back in, and now we can kind of split that or something of that sort. So in case you've had that kind of imagination, what does it look like to you guys?
Thanks. One more question. Okay, we'll take those two. Thanks. Wants to... Gen Z, what's up? Dennis, you're being referred to. Okay. Wendy.
I think that's a very interesting question, and maybe I'll speak about it because I've been watching reading trends, perhaps over the last 10 years. Well, I've been formerly in the retail book side of the industry, and the kids are all right. They're just interested in different things. They're interested in dragons falling in love. Don't ask me, So, what is that new genre called? Which is fantasy, romantasy, romance. So, yeah. And the other thing that I really like is that TikTok has become both. It's a movement unto itself, to the point that publishers have made it a category. This is a book talk section, or this is what book talk is moving. So both setting trends, both being like an engine for publicity, for books, and even, yeah. So I don't know if I've answered the question. In terms of what they are doing. But I suppose that's every generational turn, yeah? Yeah.
Okay, Gen Zs. Gen Zs in writing. Well, I do see a lot of Gen Zs who are in writing. I mean, of course, Kwani guys exist. But what I really like within Kenya is I read a lot of Substacks, Gen Zs who write Substacks. There's this girl called Jean Johnson or Jean Kio. I really liked her Substack called Money Cabaret, and I was like, oh, that is so good. Like, I wish she had an editor to actually to get it to, because it's really good. It's like, it's an essay about what it means to be to live a comfortable life in Nairobi and have gig economy workers serving you, and I was like, this is brilliant. So I do think that people are writing, because I had someone, I think on Twitter, someone made the claim that, people are not writing anymore, like there are no blogs, but I do see young people continuing to write. I think just what is always lacking is that person who can take them to the next level. Yeah, that person who can just take them to the next level. If this is an editor, if this is a publisher, it's just that person who can take them to the next level. And I liked what Kwani did, or Kwani is doing with the training of where you have workshops, workshops so that young people can come in and they learn from someone on not how to write, but how to refine their work. Yeah, so that's what I see a lot. Collaboration between writers themselves. Well, I think the first duty of a writer is to simply write. Just that's your work. There's something I often compare between Nigeria and Kenya. Nigerian writers write. They just actually do the work. They really, really work hard. But in Kenya, sometimes you'll find just writers hanging out and you just never write. You just never write. You're seated talking about the post-colony, you're talking about this, you're talking about these interesting ideas, but you're not writing. So
you can only do so many workshops.
Yeah, you're doing workshops, you're doing what? Going for trips, you're doing this, you're on Instagram, you're posting, James Baldwin, but you're not writing. You're not writing, like it's just, I think as a writer, your work is to write. That's just simple, like that's just all it is, you just write. I mean, of course, I'm not saying I should not have writer friends. I think that's important. Okay, I'm really not dissing, I'm just really not dissing. But what I mean is, yes, it's important to write because I even within my writer friends, that's how I have been able to access other types of readings, other types of opportunities, and also friends who can be able to read my work and tell me if it's good or not. But the first thing a writer should do is to write. And coming on now to your next question, the collaboration between publishers, what I wish as a writer in Kenya is if publishers took more risks. Because I know Kenyan publishers really don't take risks. So you find that a writer, for them to be taken seriously, you have to be published abroad. Then people are like, oh, come here, this guy is good. And then that person who's supposed to publish you is your friend. You're seeing them, like Tom is saying, you're seeing them in literature festivals. They're like, oh, I saw you being published, but you had the keys to publish me in the first place anyway. So I do wish that was, I do wish that was more prevalent, because I feel like there are so many people who have good books, so many people who have, and I even met someone last in May, just here at the Lit Fest, and they were talking about all these books they've read, this writing that they are supposed to do, and you can genuinely see that this person is a good writer. They just need the platform to be published. And it only takes, and also you have these platforms which mushroom up. They hire these writers, then the writers go there, the writers are told they are not good writers, and they were good writers, they get fired from those platforms. So you find that this writer has been wasted, like you've just been wasted in this publication, and you're like, why is it that we do this to our young writers? And I do think that this relationship can be improved because I do believe one piece can change your whole life. One of my friends, Yvonne, she wrote the Ken Price story, and in 2003, I think it was her first story, and that completely changed her life. So I do think one story can change your life completely. So it just takes that publisher, like Kwani with a K, which was brave enough to just publish the story, and then it just changes her life, changes other people's, like my life as well, because I am inspired by that. So I think all these things resonate throughout life. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Ati Kwani with a K. It's just Kwani. Tom and Wachuka, do you want to talk about collaborations, or do you want to respond to any of those?
No, I just wanted to say that, the whole thing about Gen Z is just laziness. I mean, look, we were just as terrible as Gen Zs if you assume they are terrible. Those of us who are in our 50s, I can count them in the room. We were just bad, we sneaked out, we smoked, we wrote letters, bought perfume, send letters to the schools where they were opened by principals and read, and you never got a response, etc. It's a cyclic thing. People in government are just lazy. Somebody just needed, look, the demands that young people make are very cheap. They want data and a good phone, whatever that is. I would give you any day, and affordable food. And then they just ask questions, hire somebody to answer those questions. And I think that, we are growing up, our young people are growing up more informed than we are. And that's scaring us. So every day I see writing by young people. Oh, by the way, it looks like, Billy, a few years ago, I would meet a young man at Kwani, and then 3 weeks later when I meet them, I say, you said you are a poet. Where's your poet? They say, I'm a closet poet. I've never heard a fancier phrase in Nairobi than I'm a closet poet. So, what exactly do you mean? And then I understood that 90% of working people are actually closet singers. They sing only in the bathroom. So there's a lot of poetry. If you go to Nuria bookstore if you're in Nairobi, there's a lot of poetry. There's a lot of collections of short stories. It's incredible, by the way, just short stories on Nairobi. And today I got a note from Nuria. There's a new book on Gen Z and writing. I think it's coming out in 2 days, a day or two. Actually, I pre-ordered that. So young people are writing. The gentleman who edited the collection of poems, Tumeteng and other poems, which has a whole range of people from the 60-year-olds to 25-year-olds, is actually a teacher at high school. And he was telling me a story in my office that one of the first things that he ever published was his students wrote composition. Remember, we used to write those compositions, the ones that Dennis is laughing at. Dennis, the day I drowned, the day I drowned, do you get the joke? As in, if you drowned, how did you write the story? You understand? And the teacher marked it and gave it back to you with 7 out of 10. You're like, yes, miracles do happen. So I don't know why. So Gen Zs are writing, if you asked me. They have better opportunities. I think a lot of them are just dumping the stuff in Grammarly, and it comes out very clean and absolutely contextless. You understand? So that Dandora is a neighbor to Kibra, or what they call Kibera. You understand? And you're looking like Dandora and Kibra. That's some distance, right? So they are writing, and I think it's us in our 50s who are unable to understand that their hormones are much more active than ours. They have eaten a lot more chemicals than we ever ate in our foods, but they are much more alert about the world. And secondly, on that collaboration thing, I think this is, generally, it's just this. And the biggest thing is for her and her. The writers will write. She needs to get the books into our inboxes, and Angela needs to archive the books. Just like I was saying, if you are looking for Murray's book on Jomo Kenyatta, if you get a copy now, it's about 10,000 bob. Yeah, so I went to look for my copy on the shelf just to keep it away, because possibly is an income. But also if the taxes go badly, I could sell and pay off. And that's a book we should have in this country. A colleague found a fairly old copy of Facing Mount Kenya in my library and wanted to buy it. Yet there's actually a new copy available. So I asked him why. He said this is the original, one of the original copies. If you were at the conference the other day, EAP was selling books, right? So I bought 7 copies of Ngugi wa Thiong'o's books, and there was no devil on the cross. They didn't have that, and they don't have the original copy of The River Between. What they have is the school edition, and like I said in the conference, the school edition circumcised out circumcision. if you know what I mean. So the point is that the collaborations are going on. I think the networks are being established, but we are a small thing. I just want to say the last thing. We are a country of a very Nairobi-centric logic. We speak a lot about Nairobi. Do you know how far Machakos is? It's about 17 kilometers if you drive at an average speed. Nakuru is about 2 hours. Meru is just about 2 hours. And these guys in Meru think Isiolo is northern Kenya. You understand? It's not. So if only these things could, like if this was being relayed out into the rest of the country, we would be able to create that, because a lot of young people from outside Nairobi have to get into Nairobi to get a lot of things either aired or published. And so that's the one reason I would celebrate something like this. I was taking my notes because as a journalist, I need to account by writing about this thing.
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to use you, Billy, as the example in response to this question about Gen Z. And it's because I think, okay, if you go back to our days working together at Kwani, and one of the things, actually my very first edition working at Kwani was the documentation of the post-election violence, because I joined in 2008. And if anyone's read the editorial of the Kwani 5 edition, which was a twin edition, Billy got a bollocking for that from Marjorie Uluthe Magoye, right? Because he was saying in his editorial that he was basically asking the older generation, why do we not have definitive texts that we can turn to make sense of what has just happened in 2007? And if I remember correctly, she wrote you a very long typewritten response to your editorial. I guess in a way what I'm saying is that I agree with you that these things, which we published he published his own bollocking in the next edition. So to your point, Tom, about the cyclical nature of these things, at the time, really the model that was being set up with the publication of Kwani and with the bigger-than-life character, charisma, audacity of Binyavanga Wainaina in particular was this idea that in setting up new forms of looking at ourselves and publishing, writing, that, and he used to love saying this, that helps us see ourselves more coherently, that in the kind of selection of material, its content, the form, the language sometimes, the fact that we were publishing in Sheng for the first time, we didn't have many fans in the academy at the time. I'm not saying you in particular. But the key thing for me in that was that there was a model that was being set up around this particular thing about not needing permission to have the audacity to do those things. And to your question about Gen Z now, I think in particular what's happening with Gen Z in Kenya, if I can be that specific, is exactly the same thing. It's a different form, it's a different time, it's a different set of issues, but it's the same kind of audacity. As to how that connects with collaboration from a library perspective, a very practical example, and I'll preface it with a question. Kwani with a Q, which comes about 2 decades later, let's argue that, Keith Angana and his fabulous Gen Z people. It's been a joy to collaborate with Keith, by the way. We've had a lot of fun over the past year or so. So Kwani with a Q, which is a nod to Kwani, maybe has questions about that Kwani. Where do they go? For me, that's where the library comes in. It's about the archive, right? And it's about the library collaborating with the publisher of Kwani to ensure that that as an archive exists and it's accessible, but also beyond that, maybe some commissioned thinking around what that time was and what the model was and the editorial direction and choices and why and so forth. A second example that I can think of is largely experiential. These 3 libraries in particular a third of their users are exactly that age set. They're aged between 18 to 24. So there's an opportunity to curate things that speak not just to their interest, but things that help to contextualize what's happening today within a historical sort of arc, if you like. And so you have protests that are happening in response to something specific. You have people of that demographic, of that age, curious about or asking questions or locating that protest within perhaps it being the first of its kind. The role of the library is to do, hey, we can also give you context about the history of protests in Kenya. We found that to be a very useful intervention point, if you like, which is providing information and context and background that people can draw from. And in essence, it's asking the same question that Billy was asking of Marjorie Oludha Magoe, of what are the reference points. Whether you use them as a point of departure or not, of course, is up to you. And we saw that work really well here last year, where we worked with 9 young interns who each then researched a particular protest moment in Kenya's history. And it was anything as recent as My Dress, My Choice to Saba Saba, for example, and then record podcasts on those particular protest movements, and then on top of that, be part of the team curating an exhibition about that. And I particularly liked the circularity of that. And I think that public libraries, because they have this archive material, can play a really big role in making that kind of connection possible, but also providing other context for people who are curious about whether there are connections between what may be happening today and what may have happened in 1956, for example. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Rachel, do we have time or... Yeah. Are there any questions in the audience? Or Wendy wants to say something. Yeah. Oh, so was there... Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Hi. Hello, guys. Hi. My name is Eddie. I am one of the few closeted bathroom singers that Professor Tom is talking about. And since he took a shot at us, I also want to say that he was part of the 2004 National Dress Initiative for Kenya, which failed, just like perhaps the Kenya National... The dream for the Kenya National Novel is also failing. My question pertains what you guys have mentioned about better writers and better editors. And if we say that Kenyan writers need editors, but also say writers need to slow down and take more time with their writing, are we asking Kenyan writers to slow down when they may actually need is to write more? Because I don't think you can edit someone into being a writer. And at the same point, you have to produce the bad sentences in order to discover the good ones. So when we say writers are rushing their process, are we talking about rushing the writing or rushing the editing? And finally, this is now just to conclude on the question, is our clamor for better writing sometimes inadvertently discouraging the very practice that produces the better writers that you guys are talking about?
Thanks. Thank you very much. Yeah, you guys want to take that?
Okay, so before I come to you, I just want to address something Mutinda asked quite specifically. Collaborations across, what that would look like for publishers, and say that I've always been a believer in community, and one of the things that you realize, and I think I would encourage a lot of us, is to think beyond Nairobi, to think beyond Kenya, and just to have that outlook. Because what you realize is that there are a lot of other people who have the same challenges as you, and just by connecting with them, that you're able to do a lot more. And perhaps that was also the genesis of me becoming a publisher, because Narrative Landscape Press East Africa is a collaboration with a publisher based in Lagos, who've been doing that for 10 years, and the publishers of, you might know this name, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And I don't think I would be able to be a publisher without that kind of a collaboration, because what it allows is for, you're starting off with a 10-year experience. Yeah? Remember, I'm only coming from a background of a reader and a bookseller. So all these things of, copyright, editorial, typesetting, that I don't need to do all of those things, I already have somebody who knows that thing. But what am I bringing? A market. I know Kenya. I know what Kenyans have been reading maybe over the last 10 years. I know a few book clubs that I can bulldoze and harass to read a book. Yeah. So those kinds of when you think like that, then you're able to solve for a lot more things. It's the same approach that we've taken in being able to not be a Kenyan publisher, but be an East African publisher. So you'll find our books in Kampala, in South Sudan, in Dar, all the way to Joburg. And not because we have money, okay, it's coming, but because you identify that there's somebody else in Kampala who is also trying to solve for the problem that you have. And exchange doesn't always have to, to look like this is a price tag. You giving me access to the people for me to give them a commodity that I have is much more valuable than me, setting up a whole operation maybe in Kampala, for instance. Yeah. The other thing that I would mention is a little bit tied to the community is, what is the word? Chama is coming to mind, but that's not what I'm looking for. But basically staying in community, right? Again, because that's how you know people who are also doing other things. And I have a theory, yeah? I have a theory. One of the challenges that I identified, especially for data, so should academia not give us studies? The other way for us to force ourselves and everybody else in this industry is to be in this one chama where we all share information, because we are all linked to the benefit of having that information. So for instance, now we can look at a bookseller and say, bookstores should be able to give us data on book sales. Yeah, because that's very identifiable. Oh, they know how many books of this and this nature go. But why would the bookstore be interested in sending you that data? No, they wouldn't. However, if the publisher, the bookseller, the library, the researcher, we're all in this chama, we all share data, we all benefit from this data, because none of us know, we're all shooting in the blind, or we have partial visibility of this whole ecosystem that we exist in. So I think that's to that. There are different ways to look at it. Segueing off of that to Eddie. Wait, you asked about, oh, yes. I think Kenyan writers, please just think beyond your community of friends. So it's really good to have people around you who gas you up, but please, that's not your audience. The people who should be impressed by your writing is the person who's never met you, right? And I think if a lot more aspiring writers get read by blind peer readers, okay, blind readers, not your friends. Your friends should be there to support you and everything, but yes, if you need work, you need somebody who will not spare your feelings and emotions, so that then your craft can benefit from it. Because I think a lot of us stop because, we are soft parented by the feedback group that gives us. And I think once you look outside, I'll give this example. There's a Kenyan writer who's done an incredible collection of a series of books called The Intasimi Warriors. You might have seen it, Shikonguru. And her journey into becoming a pretty good writer was largely self-taught, while still holding down a job and raising kids. Yeah. And when I probed into her question, she was like, she went on Upwork, of course, did some YouTube classes, did some online classes, went on Upwork, hired somebody by the hour to review her work. And then that's how she ended up getting a publisher. She's first published in the UK by Lantana. And we get those books very expensively by way of the UK, even though she's a Kenyan writer and she lives here. But anyway, so all that to say that the people who love you should also not be your marketplace. So, yeah.
Any other thoughts on...
on what Eddie has asked, yeah. So when I began writing, when I had not interacted with many other writers, I thought I was such a good writer. I genuinely thought I was the best. I would write a sentence like this and think to myself, wow, I am actually very brilliant. I am actually very... can anyone see this brilliance? Wow, how come? Anyway, thank God those things were all published because they were so bad. And the reason why they were so bad is because I had just not taken time. Because I thought this thing I've written, because in my head I was supposed to win the Commonwealth Prize for this story, my first story to ever be written. And then I win, it was £2,500, I think. And I was like, yeah, I can do this. But it was just so terrible. And even the first novel I wrote and finished was so bad. And I just remember realizing that one just needs to take time. And like Wendy is saying, I think it's very important to also collaborate with people who are just not within your community. Because I remember one of my best bits of editing was an editor from a magazine called Washington Square Review in New York, and she was trying to make me understand why describing an eye as white or as beautiful is the wrong thing, or rather it's not original. And we came to this description of a waterfall falling, ravine in a sense of describing the color white. And I was like, getting to that point took, I don't know, months. And by the time I learned from that, I had to do a lot of work within myself as well. So it's very hard to write something good the first time or to write something good quickly. I think writing something good quickly is an outlier, but it takes a lot of work to write something good and something which can last a lifetime. Because look at Fitzgerald. 100 years down the line, we're still reading The Great Gatsby. So I think writing well, one should think about writing well, not just for today, but good writing which can also last lifetimes. Not essentially you should think about it at the back of your head, but just do your best on a single sentence, and then I feel like everything else will follow. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Dennis. I think on that note, we'll have to close. We've run out of time. I just want to thank all our panelists. A round of applause, please. And I'll hand over to Rachel, who will tell us what next.
Thank you so much. Let's give another round of applause to our panelists, to Billy, our moderator. Thank you. So in the spirit of building a literary ecosystem, I have a few events that I would like to talk about. One, obviously, as a Ugandan, you are invited to the Kampala Write Festival happening 28th and 30th of this month. So if you're in Kampala, pass by, say hi, I'll be there. And also Makondo Lit Fest, because I love Yvonne and you should go for the event, right? Yeah. And of course, the amazing work that Keith is doing, the amazing work that Joan is doing. Follow Joan on Instagram. I follow her, and yeah, I know quite a lot of Kenyan books because of her, so please do. If I haven't mentioned you, please don't get offended. But yeah, so I'm just going to give more thanks, then we go and have a cup of tea. Please don't leave without having a cup of tea and speaking to somebody else that you don't know. If you are introverted, it's okay. Just come and smile at me.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll have special thanks to Wasafiri. Thank you, Sana. Thank you so much for the support. To the book bank, this space is amazing. Eastlands Library, the team here, amazing. Then a special thank you to Saseni that Bill is part of. And if you've been talking about the event, please remember to tag at the book bank, at Wasafiri, at Saseni_creative. We'll be happy to hear from you. And finally, 2 more finalies. A special thank you to the working team, photography, videography, the volunteers from University of Nairobi. Amazing. If I hadn't gone to Makerere, I would be, I think, at University of Nairobi, but yeah, Makerere took me. And also to Wanjeri. I know she's not in the room, but special thanks to Wanjeri for simply coordinating all of this. And then finally to you, the audience, thank you for coming out. Thank you for loving literature. Thank you for being part of this wonderful ecosystem. And how do you say good night in Swahili? No, madam. How do you say good night? Mwema. Usiku mwema. Guys, next year. All right, and that's it. Please, we'll go out the back, have some tea, and just chat with someone you didn't come with. All right? It's been wonderful having all of you. Have a lovely night.